Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's been a long couple of days. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to be here. I'd like to thank Olivia for all of the planning. I'd like to thank Dr. and Mrs. Davis for the invitation and all of the great work being done at the African American Heritage House here in Chautauqua. I'd also like to thank my wife, Nadia Tucker, for joining me on this journey. Speaking of journeys, I'd like to just briefly give an overview of my journey and how I came into the field of machine learning and artificial intelligence. I was born in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Can anyone point that on a map? Okay, so this is West Africa, neighboring Guinea and Liberia. And Sierra Leone has a special connection to the United States. Several hundred years ago, the Bunce Island in Sierra Leone was the destination in which slaves were transported from West Africa to the Carolinas. It was one of the few direct slave routes. And I had the opportunity to visit there a couple of years ago. And the government intentionally left the island in its natural condition. And I think that further emphasizes the magnitude of the significance of Bunce Island and its connection to the United States. Fast forward several years, 100 years later, there were a series of events that actually connect my wife and I. There was a ship called the Amistad. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie by Steven Spielberg, Amistad. Well, Amistad is based on the Sierra Leonean history of freed slaves moving from Sierra Leone to the Americas. And the historian in that movie is my late father-in-law, Dr. Arthur Abraham, who I have the distinct pleasure and honor of marrying his only daughter. I wish he were alive today to be here. He's a world-renowned historian. He spent half his career in Sierra Leone, but also then moved to the US during the height of the Sierra Leone Civil War in 1997. And it was during that time, Nadia and I, through separate paths, we went by land and she went by sea to a neighboring country and found ourselves here in the US, completely transformed our lives. I was in high school at the time, and as you can imagine, it's the easiest time to integrate into any culture. But those experiences laid the foundation for where I am today and the journey that both Nadia and I have gone through. I remember growing up in Sierra Leone and loving the arts. I had no plans of going into the field of machine learning or AI. I actually wanted to do Shakespearean and poetry and really loved the arts. And I remember we actually acted out the play Shakespeare, and we had to memorize the entire play. And I remember even some of the quotes now: "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." And I remember starting high school here in the US and enrolling in a Shakespearean course. And I remember receiving, the assignment was to write an essay about what Shakespeare, what I thought about it, a certain aspect of the play. It was Julius Caesar. And I remember getting a horrible grade on that assignment. And I went back to the teacher and asked her, what was wrong? And I remember her response being, "Well, I don't think this is what Shakespeare intended when he wrote this paragraph." And I thought to myself, I don't think either of us were alive when Shakespeare was thinking these thoughts to put down in text. But I projected out from that moment and became terrified of a path where one individual could shape my destiny based on the subjectivity of their interpretations. And it was at that moment I decided to be an engineer. And I love engineering for one reason of just math and equations. And there's very little opinion about certain aspects of why things work. It's just an equation. And to me, that was liberating, that there was a career path that I could go down where more of the outcome rested on me. And so I pursued a path of engineering, undergrad in mechanical engineering, PhD in industrial engineering, and stumbled on the field of AI totally by coincidences. At the time, there was all this data being generated by these sensors, and the question, well, what do you do with all this data? And so now, the typical equation-based ways of teaching engineering or developing systems was transforming based on the systems that were acquiring data. This was sensors in your car, sensors on aircraft. The field of engineering itself was changing. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I've studied mechanical engineering, very little knowledge about artificial intelligence. How am I going to expand my knowledge base so that I gain a deep understanding of this field? And so I'm here today as proof that you can start off with Shakespeare, you can be an engineer, and expand to this field of artificial intelligence. Thank you for the applause. The air applause. So what is artificial intelligence? Let's just take the two words, intelligence and artificial. It's almost like an oxymoron. So on one hand, artificial typically doesn't convey something positive. It's fake, it's not real, it's artificial. And then on the other hand, you have this word called intelligence. And what does that mean, intelligence? I thought I knew. I thought my wife and I were on the same page on what it meant. And then we had a discussion. Now, my wife and I, we differ and disagree on a lot of things. And apparently this is one more thing that we had different opinions on. What is intelligence? Let's turn to your neighbor and see if you have the same definition. What do you think intelligence is, and does it align with whoever is sitting right next to you and their definition of intelligence? 30 seconds. What is intelligence? Now, judging from the duration of the discussions, it seems as though we may not have a single definition on intelligence. Now, why is the definition or even the concept important to artificial intelligence. If you think of the way that we've structured our global economic system or our societies when it comes to value and hierarchies, what makes a CEO earning a certain salary different from someone who is helping serve at a restaurant? Is it the amount of knowledge that has been acquired? Or is it the ability to generate solutions and brainstorm that relate to value add? The latter. Okay, so we assign value in society based on the ability of individuals to problem solve. And then the question is, well, how do we assess that as a value assignment? How do we determine that? Well, we have exams for admissions into universities. When we go to look for jobs, we have job interviews. We have all these checks and balances that are meant to provide some level of confidence in someone's ability. But we really don't have a way, or at least a good way, of peering into our brains to determine what exactly is going on. So our best bet are things that we are able to observe through examinations or value assignment. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, this idea of machines replicating something about humans or biological intelligence, how do we quantify that? Now, we have 2 young children, an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. And as they go through the different progressions in their life, we always wonder, okay, they're at this age, wow, they're talking. They're at this age, they're walking. There's always a caveat of where they currently are, how well are they doing relative to this group. So it appears as though when we assign these metrics of intelligence, it's always relative to something or someone. And the question is, who gets to decide that? Who gets to decide what the threshold is for a machine to generate text that we read and say, this is pretty good. This is what a human would have done. Or to generate pictures that say, I would have taken this type of picture with my camera. We rely on people to serve as a proxy for artificial intelligence. Now, let's take a step back and imagine AI could read every possible blog and book and look at every video that has ever been created by people. What would be the summary of human civilization? What would it look like? What would be the takeaway value system that a machine would learn about how we treat each other, how we assign value to one another, how we perceive one another? Sure.
Okay. Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest. That's one.
You got a lot of bad information in there. You're dealing with a lot of good information.
Okay.
How does the machine deal with that? It's making, I think it's a problem.
Well, let's take human learning, right? So we learn through our experiences. We are exposed to both good and bad aspects of humanity. When we're in our education system, we learn about the most challenging periods of our history. But typically, thankfully, we don't focus on the bad to try to replicate the bad, at least most people, thankfully. So how can we take this collective knowledge that makes up human history through articles and books, and what would be the general takeaway? Now, one critical component of artificial intelligence is the need for ground truth. Ground truth. And there's only one. And what is that for different questions that we pose? Is the sky, when you look at the sky right now, is it blue? Who says it's blue? Okay, we have one person that says it's blue. Now, are we going to always go by the majority vote? Or are we going to take into consideration the lone brave soul who sees the same observation that we have and concludes that the sky is blue? Ground truth is absolutely critical to the way that machines learn. And the question is, who in society is the arbiter for providing ground truth? Let me give an example of a non-AI system that has encoded within it biases. Maybe some of our colleagues in the audience have experienced this, but far too often when I'm traveling and I go to use the restroom and I stick my hand out and the soap dispenser that's automatic, nothing comes out. And I wipe my hands and I stick my hands out again and nothing comes out. And then someone else comes to the soap dispenser and they stick their hands out and soap comes out. I say, what could be going on here? Racial bias. Who's racial? The soap dispenser is racially biased? The soap dispenser is racial. So when the soap dispenser was born, they had these experiences of black people say, I'm going to be. So how do these biases end up in systems that engineers design? If we take a step back and realize that the universe itself is non-uniform. Imagine the moon had a personality and a consciousness. Just for one moment, imagine the moon. What is keeping the moon close to the Earth? Gravity. But imagine if the moon had a being and it was being pulled by this force that it could not escape. So size of objects impact their gravity, impact the way that different stars and planets relate to one another. So the universe itself is non-uniform. Let's take why the soap dispenser doesn't work for a wide range of people. In the universe, and this has nothing to do with people, there are differences in the way that light bounces off different material. It just so happens that the darker the material, the more light is absorbed in that material. So whether or not it's a black person putting their hand under the soap dispenser, or if I took this water bottle and put it under the soap dispenser, soap would not come out. And that is just infrared and the way the system was designed. Now, you could overcompensate for this realization by having the cutoff be wider, to say, I'm going to accept this range as someone's hand instead of this range. Okay, I'm going to accept this range instead of this range. What is the challenge of that, you think? Why didn't the designers design it like that?
It was running continuously.
So now you've introduced a new problem. You've introduced a problem where the soap may just, without someone being there or when everything passes by, just dispense soap. So this challenge of fairness and biases is a very complex one. And we don't want to just gloss over the complexity. There's first a realization that the universe itself is non-uniform. We need to understand that non-uniformity in the universe and then design our systems in such a way that they add value and are beneficial for a wider range. So by acknowledging the non-uniformity of our environment, we're able to make a decision of accepting this amount of light bouncing back as the amount of light for all people. Now, how would we solve the soap constantly dropping off? Well, you could design like a soap catcher at the bottom, right? There are many different things you can design. The soap dispenser doesn't have feelings. But when I go and I can't get soap, I have feelings, and my feelings are hurt. Okay? So this is a system that's just using a rule-based approach to determine if someone is using the soap and if someone isn't. It's a simple, if this, then that. That is not artificial intelligence. Okay? Here's how artificial intelligence would have solved the same problem. So there's a sensor on the soap dispenser. The model starts off by making no assumption about anything. I don't know what a person looks like. And so I come up, put my hand under the soap dispenser, it collects one data point. Our young lady comes under the soap dispenser, it collects another data point. Our gentleman here comes under the soap dispenser, and before long, the model has captured enough data in which it captures that range of skin types that represent a wider range of people. So, on one hand, the non-AI approach, you have decision makers saying, this is the cutoff of what it means to be a hand. In the AI approach, it's collecting data about a wide range of hands to say, this is what the skin types look like for these hands, and then building a model on top of this. The danger of AI is that, don't worry, it's not too bad. Look, the danger of AI is that who gets to decide, label, and collect these different data points, right? So that could be a potential bias. If all I did was collect data from Chautauqua, that's different from collecting data across the US. So the person who collects the data and the person who decides what a hand is, that go into the artificial intelligence model are just as important. They hold a lot of power. And so when you think of AI systems across the world, we should at least know who these individuals are and ensure that there's some type of accountability when things go wrong. And as a society, acknowledging that no system is perfect and having that grace when there are imperfections, we try to make the systems better. Now, if I go to the bathroom and soap doesn't come out, yes, I'm mad. I can try another one. I can wait until a friend comes in the bathroom that doesn't look like me and helps me to activate the machine. But it's not the end of the world, right? What are the implications of AI biases that impact demographics across America and across the world? In a similar kind of system, there's an AI model that looks at videos of people and says, this face, I've seen this face before in another database that was committing a crime somewhere, and this person is a criminal. And without any human input, we send the cops to your house because you were identified by this AI model as being a criminal. Now, this isn't science fiction. This has happened several times in the United States when African Americans have been falsely identified by these computer vision AI systems for being criminal or being part of a criminal database when it was a faulty classification. I want you to imagine that parent coming home that day. Open the doors to their family. Next thing you know, there's a team of police at their door making a false arrest. The implications go beyond just the one incident. The implications impact that individual, they impact families, and they impact communities. And unfortunately, in many cases, it takes the one bad apple or multiple bad apples for us to retroactively try to fix things. But we are in an position to project about the possible harms and biases so that we don't have to wait for these failed instances. I'll give you another example of these AI systems. It's called predictive policing. How many people have heard of AI predictive policing? Does anyone want to share what they think it is? Yeah.
Well, I believe it to be trying to identify a person that may in the future create some kind of criminal activity based on some characteristic, but not action that the person may have.
Right. So imagine every year in August in Chautauqua, there's an increase in some whatever crime, historically. And so these models, these AI models train based on historical data so that they can identify a particular location in a city and send police there before a crime even happens. Imagine, your community has an increased presence of law enforcement just because of training data sets and past experiences. Now, one of the most disappointing things for me in the applications of AI, out of all of the ways that we could be using artificial intelligence, education, healthcare, we seem to be gravitating to crime and police enforcement. There's an opportunity to expand and reconsider where in our society has the most need for artificial intelligence and really try to solve the underlying societal issues. So yes, I can predict that a crime is about to happen in this particular location. But isn't it more interesting to predict the reason why, or understand why this crime exists, the socio-economic reasons, and try to use AI to enhance our education system or other techniques? So these are some of the opportunities to rethink how we're applying artificial intelligence. I'd like to touch upon training data just a little bit because this is at the core of artificial intelligence systems. Training data represents the experience in which AI models learn how to make predictions or inferences. And so the question is, where do they come from? Where do they come from? And as you think about this, I'm going to take my jacket. Errol has been telling me to take my jacket off for many, many days, because it is getting warm. Why can't AI predict that for me? Training data. Any thoughts on what it is and where do we get it from?
Training data is data we use to train AI models, and we get it from either open source, some technology, computer science, and things like that, and or specific domain data sets.
Okay, so primarily, and this is for those who are artists in the room or have creative expression, these are some of the challenges right now in modern society of what does it mean to attribute content to the creators, who owns content if you publish it publicly, and how do we reward artists if their data is used in ways that train these AI models. There isn't a consensus on this yet. So I had the fortune of serving as a commissioner for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and these are some of the policy questions that are being considered in terms of who has ownership of data, and what if an AI model generates new data, who can copyright? Can AI copyright or create patents? These are all questions that are being discussed. If we take a step back and think about out of the 7 billion people in the earth, the percentage of individuals across the world who don't even yet have internet connectivity, let alone a computer or means to contribute data into the system, right? We're creating these global systems that will be deployed all across the world, but only a subset of humanity even has the ability and access to contribute to these systems. So the way that training data unfolds is going to be absolutely critical in the way that artificial intelligence unfolds. Where are we going with AI? Well, that's up to us to decide. What would be dangerous is for us to think that AI should only be that of engineers and scientists. I would love to see more philosophers pondering interesting questions such as, at what point do we have belief or trust? Or is it possible for humans to fall in love with AI systems? Would that be a good idea right now? Yes? Some people want to find love, and I was talking the other day of a person who wanted to recreate voices of loved ones. And so how do we decide? Yes, how do we decide where the limit is? And if collectively we're not part of that discussion, then you're going to leave it to the same individuals who made a decision for that soap dispenser to have this range. And with that, I thank you very much for listening and open up the floor to questions.